Welcome to the Jacksonville Momcast, a podcast dedicated to telling the real stories of local Jacksonville moms. Sponsored by Jacksonville Beach Moms, each month we'll cover topics to help you navigate mom life on the First Coast. Thanks for joining us as we tackle all things motherhood and more with a focus on the 904.
Welcome to episode 38 of Jacksonville Momcast. Our guest today is Rachel Sultzer. Rachel is the owner of Hugs and Snugs, a postpartum care service. So Rachel, let's kick off by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
I have been living in Jacksonville for about 10 years now. Prior to starting my postpartum business, I was actually a nanny for a family up in Ponte Vedra for about 7.5 years. So I started when the oldest was about 3 months old, and we welcomed a second while I was there too. So I definitely had a lot of hands-on postpartum experience when the second came. And actually, when he was born, I got certified as a lactation counselor. So that was about 6 years ago. And I was kind of welcomed into the birth world by my mentor, Kelly Googe, who's a local doula. And she really kind of opened my eyes to the birth world. I had no idea. I always loved being part of childcare and the family structure. I babysat my whole life, but really the only option that was ever presented to me was being a teacher. And that really wasn't, I didn't connect with that. So I just kind of did other things, went to college for other stuff, and stumbled into the birth world. And it just opened up my eyes to this whole other thing that's out there, and I fell instantly in love with it. And as much as I love birth and being part of birth, the postpartum space really called to me. I basically have, like I said, been supporting families since I was 11 years old as a mother's helper. So really kind of transitioning into that space was easy. And so I opened Hugs and Snugs when I became a lactation counselor, but have been doing full-time postpartum doula work for about a year now. So yeah, just really loving the space I'm in right now. And I live in Murray Hill with my partner and our 3 fur babies, and just working really hard and supporting lots of families. So
That's so great. So you mentioned your business, Hugs and Snugs. So tell us a little bit about your business, what you offer, how it works.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I said before, I'm a certified lactation counselor. So with that, I come into homes and I offer breastfeeding support for families that want to breastfeed. But I do also a little bit more than that in that space. I'm very passionate about infant feeding altogether. So just making sure that the baby's oral motor function is working the way that it needs to be. I'm really passionate about tongue ties and oral restrictions, because it's more than just a breastfeeding issue or an infant feeding issue. It does go on to cause issues in the future. So I offer a lot of support in that area. I'm also a certified breastfeeding educator. So I offer breastfeeding classes at a number of different offices in Northeast Florida, all the way from St. Augustine, up to here in Jacksonville. And then I'm a certified postpartum and infant care doula as well. So with that, I'm coming into the home or the hospital after the baby's born to offer support to the mothers, to the families, to help really transition from that birth to the postpartum space, and really kind of making sure that we're keeping mom, the number one focus, while still providing obviously infant support and education, however that looks like for the families. We also, and I'm going to say we a lot because I work with my postpartum partner, Mary, but we also offer a lot of sibling support and partner support, pet support. Everybody goes through a transition when you bring a new baby into the home. So we're really there just to kind of help guide that transition and get our families to a space where they're like, we've got this. Thanks for your help, but we're good now. And yeah, it's just been, it's fantastic. It's fulfilling. And really, we just kind of fill in the gaps and all that good stuff. So
That's so great. And we had someone on last season who does some follow-up care for mothers. And one of the things we talked about is how in the last, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years, because my kids are 13 and going to be 17 this week. That wasn't a thing.
No.
Care for moms 15 years ago. It was like baby, 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 take your baby home and treat it well. Like there was there was very little follow, you went to your 6-week postpartum visit, but there were very few services to really make sure that, like you said, mom and the siblings and the partner and the pets, like everybody was transitioning well. What made you kind of decide to open your own business? There's now, I feel like there's a lot of services out there, and there's a lot of kind of large groups available in Jacksonville with lots of, different service providers all under one house. What made you decide to do Hugs and Snugs, on your own?
Yeah, I mean, so it started as the lactation. So I was working, still full time as a nanny, doing kind of the lactation services, when I could, really offering support to Kelly because she's super busy. And when it was starting to come to a point where my nanny kids were getting older and going into school full time, and I really needed to figure out, okay, how, what's my next step? Do I start fresh with a brand new family, or do I take this huge leap of faith, right, and offer, these services to the families in Northeast Florida? And I decided it was kind of time to take a jump and, see what I can do. It's always served me well in the past. I've done, I went to school for tourism and hospitality, and I took a jump from there when things just kind of got, that wasn't my thing anymore, to, becoming the full-time nanny, and everything had kind of always, when I listened to my gut, worked out the way that I needed it to. So, in the process of being a nanny, I created a lot of relationships with family in the area and a lot of providers and, other resources. So it just seemed like the perfect time to just kind of go all in. And I'm in a little bit of a unique situation because I don't have any children of my own. So I really could spend a lot of my time, focusing on, our clients and our families, and not having to kind of balance that out. So I just felt like I was going to take the leap and see where it goes. And I knew if I needed to, I could always go back to nannying, but I think I'm in a really wonderful spot and just really excited to, continue growing the business.
That's good answer. I love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned your partner, Kelly, who I know is kind of a partner, and I know you work together on some stuff. Talk to us a little bit about that partnership. And I know you guys have a new website out. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Kelly was my mentor, actually. And she works independently, and we're actually all part of Northeast Florida Doula, the Northeast Florida Doula group, which is essentially a group. It's not an agency. So it's just a bunch of doulas and birth doulas and postpartum doulas. And we've got, other, fourth trimester fitness and, other kind of birth and postpartum related services in that group. So Kelly was my mentor. Mary is my partner, actually. So Mary, that's okay. Mary Thesick is, I'm throwing a lot of names at you right now, is my postpartum partner. And so she is also in the North Florida Doula group. She's a birth doula. She does placenta encapsulation, and she's a breastfeeding specialist as well. And when I was entering in the postpartum space, she had been doing postpartum kind of on her own for a few years through COVID. And so we connected, and instantly it was like this beautiful relationship. I mean, we balance each other out so well, and we just decided, let's give it a go. And so her and I work as a team. So basically, if you contract with either one of us, then you get both of us. And so we do home visits so that you can meet us first. And then obviously we just kind of offer availability for both of us, and our clients get to choose, what shifts that they want during that week. And so you get either one of us. But I am so thankful for Mary. I mean, we are in such a unique situation that we just really work very well together. And I think we both confidently can say that she will leave one house and I will come to that house, and it'll be the exact same care and the exact same support. We're constantly talking back and forth together. It's just been such a wonderful partnership. So we recently decided that it would just be easier for our clients if we had, a website that highlighted what we offer together as a team. And so that's Postpartum Doulas Jacksonville. So www.postpartumdoulasjacksonville.com. So we're still not an agency. We're still just partners, but this way people don't get confused who we are. We are together. We work as a team. And you can find, what we do, or offer a support there. And then you can also individually get linked to our individual websites and see kind of what we offer individually too. Because she does, like I said, birth and placenta encapsulation, which is something that I don't do. So.
Excellent. And we'll put a link to that website in the show notes in case people want to learn some more or find
Perfect.
Either one of you. So in your business, you mentioned in the beginning, you have a lot of different titles: lactation counselor, breastfeeding educator, postpartum doula. Talk us through a little bit about, what each of those are. And then do you have a favorite service that you specialize in?
So the lactation counseling, again, is to support my breastfeeding mothers, or parents. So, basically when your baby's born and you're breastfeeding and you run into any hiccups, you would give me a call, and then I would come in and come do a home visit. And we basically I assess the situation while we're there, and we come up with a game plan. And typically, I might see you once and then we text for a whole year, right? Or I can come back 3, 4, 5 times, however often you need me. And really, every visit is different. Every baby's different. Every mother's different. Every dyad, them together, is different. So really just kind of coming in, figuring out what's going on, and then how we move forward from there to make sure that their breastfeeding journey is a successful one, if that's the one that they want to lead down. I am very much mother focused, and so I will be there and I will support you through it all. But if there comes a point where you come to me and say, hey, listen, this just isn't working out for us, or, it's taking a toll on my mental health, and we have done everything under the sun that you want to do, I'm going to support the decision that's going to work best for you and your family. I come in with a very non-judgmental approach and want to make sure that everybody and every decision feels supported, as long as everybody is safe and, happy and healthy. As a breastfeeding educator, I like to set my parents up for success, right? So my classes are about 2 hours long. I offer the in-office classes. So like I said, I have a bunch in the Northeast Florida area. I also offer virtual classes as well as in-home classes where I can come to your house and we can do a private class. And we're really just kind of talking about the general breastfeeding as a whole, right? Breastfeeding takes more than just 2 hours of education, but at least you've got some education where you can then kind of leave that class and think about it, right? I like my parents to go home and think about everything that they learned. And then if they have any questions, they can reach out to me. But most importantly, they have some nuggets of information that they can use to advocate for themselves and their baby if need be. And they have me as a resource, right? All of my parents that take my breastfeeding class have my number, and they can text me to either set up an appointment or just to touch base, right? I have some folks that take my class that I never see, but will send me a few text messages just like, hey, this is what's happening. What are your thoughts, right? So that's, the breastfeeding educator. And then the postpartum piece of it takes everything into account, right? So really, like I said, filling in those gaps. I like to kind of market us as like sister wives, right? So we're in there to support you, to support your family, excuse me, to make sure that you're not trying to be a super woman in that period and do it all. We want to protect, that bonding time you have with your baby. I like to tell my parents they can use me as a scapegoat for lots of different things. Well, my lactation counselor said, or my postpartum doula said, right? So that they can kind of set up boundaries if they need to, so that they feel protected in their postpartum space. and, offering support to whoever needs it while I'm there. Like I said, if it's, the dog that's just needing a little extra attention, or the little brother or older sister or whatever that, is feeling like they just need some one-on-one time, we're there to provide that support. And in regards to what my favorite is, that's a tough one. I mean, they're all so unique. I love breastfeeding. I love that it's making a comeback. I love that women are feeling more empowered to speak out about it and to do it in public, and to not feel shame about breastfeeding for a day or breastfeeding for 3 years, right? Like I'm loving the narrative that we're creating around breastfeeding again, because I think it was lost for a really long time, and we're starting to see the comeback of it, which is bringing a lot of research money to it as well, which is opening up the doors to, problem solving at the root versus, just dealing with the symptoms, which is amazing. But I really love postpartum too. I mean, because postpartum is more than just breastfeeding, right? I've got postpartum folks that do a combination of breastfeeding and pumping. I do, folks that are in just formula feeding. And so I don't know. I think the postpartum piece, I think, is my favorite, because it really just takes everybody to an account, right? And it's really, again, about focusing on mom and supporting mom and making her feel just comfortable to express her feelings. And, again, just destigmatizing any shame around certain things, and to normalize that it's okay to feel joy and to feel angry and happy all in the same time period, right? And so being able to normalize a lot of those things for my moms and my parents is really rewarding. So I love them all pretty equally, but I think postpartum is probably my winner. So
Good answer. I was curious what you're very passionate about, your field. And so
yeah,
it's great to talk to people who have that passion and to hear like, can you pick a favorite? Sometimes that's a trick question.
it's hard. It's very hard.
Now, I am fascinated by overnight postpartum support. As I mentioned, my kids are older, and this, like I said, 15 years ago, overnight postpartum support was like your mom comes to stay for a week after
Right.
your baby's born, and hopefully she'll get up with the baby at some point or not. I mean, it just
Right.
like there was no, website dedicated to overnight postpartum. It was kind of like just do the best you can. So talk to us a little bit about that for people who may not know what that looks like. What happens when you come in as an overnight postpartum doula? Like what is your role? What do you do? Just talk us through a little bit on that one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so our goal while we're there as postpartum support is to optimize your sleep, right? So we want to make sure that you're getting some stretches of sleep while we're there, because we all know that sleep deprivation is a form of torture, and it's definitely something to be expected in those first couple days, weeks, months, even years, right? So we want to make sure that we are allowing you the ability to get some good stretches in between feeding. So if we have, moms, let's say, that are breastfeeding, typically we'll take the baby with us, keep the baby with us. And so mom can sleep. And then when the baby starts to wake up and is ready to nurse, we will bring the baby to mom so she can nurse. But then from there, we're going to take the baby, change the diaper, get them back down and settled, and make sure that, again, mom's getting that good amount of sleep, or, and especially the partner sleeping next to them. I've got a family right now that's got, three, this is their third, and their boys are, both under 5, right? So dad's got to get a good stretch of sleep too, so that he can support the boys during the day. So again, it's really just about optimizing your sleep, but also, if mom needs help getting in and out of the bed, right? Depending on her experience during birth, whether or not she had a C-section, or if she is dealing with, some ramifications of, not a great vaginal birth. Even in the best circumstances, our bodies go through physical trauma. So making sure we support mom there, and making sure that she's eating and taking her medicine and drinking overnight and using the restroom. We're also, possibly making her what we call padsicles, right? So things that she can wear, to help comfort her down there so she's not in so much pain. But again, optimizing the sleep, that's our biggest goal. We're also helping to create healthy sleep habits for the babies. So when we take the babies from our moms or from our parents, we're not sitting up holding the baby in a bright room with the TV on, right? We're making sure that we get the baby to sleep. We're putting the baby down in a safe sleep environment. We're using sound machines and swaddles. And again, making sure that we're setting up our parents for success so that when we're not there, they are still getting some good stretches of sleep and still able to, get the baby down without having to worry about holding the baby all night. For our parents or moms that are pumping, let's say, if and we're bottle feeding, obviously we'll take the same thing. We'll take the baby, we'll bottle feed, but mom will pump. She'll send us a message that we'll pump. We'll come collect the milk, we'll store the milk, we'll clean her pump parts, and then we'll leave her pump parts for her outside her door. So when she's ready to pump again, minimizing anything that our parents have to do in order to optimize their sleep. And then with our formula fed babies, a lot of the times our parents are like, all right, we'll see you in the morning. And usually when we get there, we spend an hour or two kind of chatting with our parents, troubleshooting anything if we need to troubleshoot, kind of getting, the agenda for overnight before they go to bed. We also do some light housework. So if there's laundry or dishes, things that we can kind of keep kind of quiet and make sure that we're setting our families up for success the next day, we'll do that as well. So.
I mean, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'll have you come and stay and pack lunches for my teenagers.
Sure. Absolutely. I've done that before for some of my clients that have older siblings. And, it's just that one last thing that's like, they don't have to think about. You leave me a list of things that you want me to do and you want me to pack a lunch, I'll pack a lunch.
I mean, that sounds amazing. So
yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about breastfeeding and lactation services. What do you think is the biggest misconception that new parents have when it comes to breastfeeding a baby?
So the biggest misconception, and this is it's tricky, that breastfeeding is natural, right? It is natural, but it still takes a lot of work. So I tell my parents, breastfeeding is natural, like walking is natural, right? People think breastfeeding is natural, like breathing is natural. Our babies come out and they just know how to breathe, right? And that's it. Breastfeeding is very much like walking. There are a lot of steps that you have to take in order to get to that successful breastfeeding journey. And it really can take a full 12 weeks to get there. Some folks can get it in a few weeks. Some folks, it takes a little bit longer. But allowing yourself the patience, allowing yourself to, stay committed if you really want to get to that point, and giving yourself and your baby some grace during that time period, because it's very much a learning curve. There's a lot that goes into breastfeeding, and there's a lot of medical interventions that can happen at birth that can stall some of those reflexes, right? Our babies are born wanting to get to the breast, and they do know how to feed, right? They know what they're looking for, but it does take a lot of work to get into that good rhythm and to manage the stuff that happens really, like I said, within those first 12 weeks. And so I think a lot of people go into birth or go into breastfeeding and go, we'll just figure it out, and I would just advise those folks to take a class, right? Or to, read a couple books just to get some general knowledge, and to also have an accurate expectation of what it's going to look like. It's hard work, and that's okay. We can do hard things, right? We know that. But having that expectation ahead of time is going to save you from some of that emotional trauma you get from having a skewed expectation, if that makes sense. So just really reiterating that it's, time, commitment, patience, things that are really hard when we're trying to feed our babies, and when we're making sure they're gaining weight and making sure they're peeing and pooping and we're exhausted, and, all of the things, and we've got the hormonal changes. It's very hard for me to tell my my parents, like, it's just going to take time. But honestly, that's the case. And so, like I said, taking a class, getting connected to a breastfeeding professional, I pride myself, Mary and I pride ourselves in the fact that we have a lot of great relationships with amazing resources in our community. And so if there's something that we can't, you know, we can reach out and have a lot of wonderful personal relationships with folks in the area that will be able to support our families. So, just try not to go into it blind. Having a little education is going to be key, and keeping your expectations manageable, because it's tough.
And I love, that's probably the best analogy I've ever heard, is that it's natural like walking, but it's not natural like breathing. I think that's
Right.
so important to tell people, because especially as a mom, I mean, if you've watched, any type of child development where you're like waiting for those first steps and waiting for those first steps and waiting for those first steps, it's, the same idea, like you said, like just kind of waiting and waiting and waiting and hoping that it's catches on.
Right.
And so as a lactation counselor, what are some things you do? You mentioned the education, and I know you're there for support, but what are some other things you do to help parents be successful in their breastfeeding journey?
So depending on what's going on, if I've got a mom that's coming to me and saying, there's a bunch of different things. It's normally like, I'm nervous I'm not making enough, or, I'm in a lot of nipple pain, or I'm cracked and I'm bleeding, or, I come in, like I said, I assess the latch. I see, what's going on when our babies are latching, what's causing either the lack of supply, or why do you even think you're not making enough? A lot of the times, my moms are making plenty, and they just have this this preconceived notion that they're not making enough, right? So just kind of talking through that first, and then assessing the mom and baby relationship at the breast, and then coming up with a plan from there. So again, like I had mentioned earlier, I'm very passionate about oral restrictions. So that could be a lip, a tongue, or cheek ties. So if I do an assessment and I'm noticing that the baby's presenting with some symptoms that seem like they might have some oral restrictions, my next step is then to refer, to a specialist that's going to be able to diagnose that. And then from there, really educating on the parents on what that next step is going to look like. We also do a lot of referrals for body work, right? So like I had mentioned, birth is very traumatic for mom and baby. And so a lot of the times our babies come out and they've got some, just tension in their fascial system that just needs to be worked out a little bit. So if I'm noticing that, and that might be causing some breast discomfort because baby isn't able to, have a nice wide open mouth or a good latch, they're kind of chompy at the breast because they've got some tension in their neck and their jaw, I might refer them, we've got tons of wonderful chiropractors in the area that specialize in fascial release. Or, we've got some wonderful OTs and PTs in the area that do that as well. So just making sure that, I'm referring my parents to those folks. And again, guiding them through that process. I don't blindly refer to anybody. If I'm going to refer, I'm going to be in contact with the person I'm referring to. I'm going to let them know what I saw. And then I'm going to very much present what that appointment's going to look like. And then I want to make sure that I'm staying in contact with that provider. And like I said, Mary and I pride ourselves on the relationships that we have with some wonderful providers in the area. And it's a close relationship where we can stay on top of everybody. And making sure that everybody is cared for and supported in the way that we want them to be supported. So that's typically what a session looks like. Sometimes it could just be an easy positional tweak, right? Like sometimes I come in and I just move the baby a little bit and mom goes, oh my God, like that made a world of difference, right? So really just kind of troubleshooting when I'm there, coming up with a game plan, and then making sure that I'm following up, and providing, referrals if need be. And then, like I said, all of my parents have my phone number. So I've got some folks that still text me and their babies are a year old and they're asking for cup recommendations, right? So really just keeping that line of communication open, and, we like to tell our parents, use us as Google, stay off of Google and social media, right? Like if you have a question, Google, like let us be your Google, and, we're happy to do that for you. So
I love that you kind of like prep the parent before they
yeah,
go to that appointment, because as a new mom, when you're referred to anybody for anything that might be the tiniest little, problem with your newborn, it's, just terrifying. It doesn't
yeah,
matter what it is.
right.
So for you to be able to kind of be like, this is, you're going to go in and they're going to like look at this and they're going to look at that and they might use this language. That's just such a great resource for a new parent, because it's just so overwhelming and it's emotional and it's, there's just so much going on in your head that it's nice to have somebody to kind of walk you through that.
Absolutely. And I've been to appointments with my parents too. I am happy if it works with scheduling to come to appointments with them so that they have, that extra support. Or if, they're feeling frazzled, I can go, oh, wait, remember we talked about this, or, so I'm happy to accompany my parents to appointments if need be too.
That's so great. And just to have an
Yeah.
extra set of ears to,
Yeah.
remember what everything was said.
Yeah.
So do you find that there's a big difference when it comes to breastfeeding success with second, third, fourth children? Do you work mostly with first-time parents, or do you, what does that look like in your experience?
Yeah. I think the biggest difference is just confidence, right? Like our second and third time parents just have a little bit more confidence. They might be a little bit more relaxed around, the gaining of the birth weight in 2 weeks, or, certain things that are kind of like drilled into our new parents, as like, markers of success. I feel like my second and third time parents, or fourth or fifth time parents, just are a little bit more comfortable in their skin. They're a little bit more confident with, how things are going. I think that's really the biggest difference. But I see a good balance of both, honestly. And sometimes I think I see more like second or third time parents than I do first time ones, because they also know to reach out for help sooner. And so they know, okay, yep, this isn't going right. And I'm not going to do this I'm not going to suffer for 3 weeks before I reach out to help. I'm going to ask for help right now, so that is also the big difference, is that I feel like some of my new parents, whether it's a lack of education or just like maybe a pride thing, or, I don't know, it could be anything. They just may not reach out for help sooner. Maybe they just don't know it's out there. Whereas my parents with multiple kids are like, yeah, no, I know there's somebody, there's somebody for everything. So I'm going to reach out for that person today because I know this doesn't feel right. So yeah, I get a good mix of both for sure.
Interesting. And my next question, that's an interesting perspective, because I want to know, I feel like sometimes there's a stigma to asking for help, and that maybe you see more with first time parents thinking like, oh, I'm supposed to be able to do it all and do it myself and do it perfectly. And we're going to breastfeed for a year and it's going to be amazing. I don't need that help because my body will let me do it.
Right.
Do you see that at all? Do you see it? I also think that might be more my generation. And I think some of the younger moms coming up now are kind of like, don't care what people think, which amen for them.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what you see as far as that, and possibly by the time you get to your second or third kid, you don't care what people think because you and you're like, whatever. There's like a great meme that's like, your first kid gets all organic, and by the third, they're just eating like the French fries off the floor of the van, and it's 100% accurate. Like there's truth in that. So I'm curious, like, do you see that kind of like, I don't want to say shame, but like, I feel like there is a sense in society that you shouldn't need help as a mother.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's kind of going away. And I think it's kind of going away because although, I mentioned social media can be, damaging, it's also shed a light on a lot of things. So, I get served up a ton of postpartum and birth content on Instagram. That's as far as I go. I have not entered the TikTok world. I just feel a little too old for that. But I think because people are talking about it more and normalizing it, it's not as bad as it was, you know, 5, 10, 15 years ago, like you said, right? And I think sometimes I think sometimes the hardest part could even be, and this isn't all the time, could even be from those, mothers that were like, hey, I did it all, like, even my mom says sometimes like, gosh, I did it all. And you went to daycare at 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. And I worked a full-time job and, your dad was traveling. And then I had the second, and not that she's like, prideful about it. She's more like somehow I managed, right? So sometimes I think maybe that narrative is being passed down, not on purpose, right? Because I will say that I'll come into breastfeeding appointments where mom, mom is there, and sometimes I'm counseling them on their breastfeeding experience because they didn't have help, and then they feel guilty, or they go, well, we didn't have all those things that you had, or so even if they're not directly saying things, we pick up everything, right, from our parents, and we absorb it all. And so I think if anything, maybe there's some of that there, but definitely the generation of moms that are coming up now, I think because we're being exposed with so much of normalizing asking for help and normalizing that this is what this looks like, and it doesn't, always, a lot of the Instagram versus reality stuff, right? It's not as bad as it used to be. But with that being said, there are still some folks out there that think they can do it all, and there's always going to be unicorns. I tell my families this all the time. There are going to be unicorn sleepers. There are going to be unicorn people that just breastfeed with no problem. There are going to be unicorn people that have a great supply, unicorn moms that can just do it all, but they're unicorns, right? And so let's normalize the rest of us, so that you don't feel any sort of shame in asking for help. And like I said, I think the exposure from like TikTok and Instagram and things like that has really helped to kind of pass that rhetoric along and make sure that people are seeking help sooner. So I don't know if does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
perfect. No, I think that was great. I think that makes perfect sense. And I think you're right. Like, I think that some of that is generational, that will hopefully be phased out, because I'm already like, we have some friends that just adopted a little one, and I'm like, there's people that'll like come in and help you with stuff and like do
Right.
like, we didn't have any of that. And I just think, when you know better, you do better. And that applies, so much to raising children and birthing babies. And just, I also didn't ride in a car seat when I was born. So, I mean, things have changed. Things have changed.
Right.
So it's good to see it. I think there's so much with things like car seats and bouncies and walkers. And, like when data comes out, I feel like on the consumer end, stuff like that changes a lot quicker. But then for things like services, things like that, needing
Right.
help, more emotional and mom-centered care, I feel like it's coming. It's just not as fast as,
Right.
The government saying this is not safe. If they came out and were like, this is not safe, this mother needs support, I feel like it would move a little quicker, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah. And that's a whole other conversation too, about just, you compare us to other countries in the world, and we're just bad. It's bad, and so it's not being, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to do the research. The healthcare industry's just not there yet. And I don't know if they'll ever, I don't know. There's some wonderful providers out there that are trying really hard, but like all of us, you hit roadblocks, right? There are other big things out there that are in our way. So, yeah, compared to other countries in terms of postpartum support, we're pretty stinky. But I think that, we are, as a society, doing a much better job of, trying to figure out a way around that, right? And trying to figure out a way to, like, push that postpartum, support into the limelight and to normalize it. And, we've got, organizations like Postpartum Support International, right? And, that really focus a lot obviously on, postpartum mood disorders and, normalizing all of that and making sure that there's no shame around, you know, feeling a certain way and how do we differentiate baby blues from postpartum depression. And it's definitely coming, but it is still very much on us to educate ourselves, right? It isn't like consumer driven where it's just like out there, out there, out there, out there, or CNN or whatever is saying like, okay, this product needs to be pulled from the market. It's really still very much on us to do the research and to do the education. But I'm seeing a progression upwards, which is very exciting. So
yes, I agree. It's just slow.
it is slow.
It's
Yeah.
hard to watch it be so slow when, like you
I know.
mentioned, other countries are light years ahead of us
Yeah.
in terms of
Yeah.
postpartum care.
Yeah.
But hopefully we're going to get there. And I do think social media has helped with that aspect because you can connect with moms in other countries,
Yeah.
like you can watch Swedish TikTok on postpartum
Right.
care. You could be all
Right.
into that feed
Right.
and be like, what do you mean they get, all this stuff
Yeah.
from the government support and time
Right.
off and whatever
Right.
else, who knows what else they get.
Everything under the sun.
Yeah. I mean, so then,
Yeah.
moms in America are like, hey, hang on a second. Like, all these other countries have these great programs. What about us? So
Right.
I do think it's, like you said, I think it's coming. I think it's slow. I agree. The difference between new moms now and new moms even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it's a slow progression, but
Yeah.
we're getting there.
Yeah.
So for parents who are shopping around for some postpartum support, breastfeeding support, what are some good questions to ask to make sure that you're a good fit? Because obviously that, someone's going to come into your home, work with your family, maybe work with younger siblings, with spouses, like what you obviously want somebody who's on the same page as you and is going to mesh well. What are some, good questions to ask? What are some red flags to look out for in terms of, interviewing caregivers? Like kind of give us the lowdown on that process.
Yeah, I mean, credentials are important. So making sure that, they have their credentials and, that they are up to date, making sure they're CPR certified is important. You can always ask for references. So don't be afraid to ask for references. All care providers should have them, and they should have, parents and families on the ready that are willing to give them references. I think it's also just about meshing, I mean, just seeing how the conversation flows, making sure that your care provider, like you said, is on the same page with support. If you feel like they are trying to push their agenda, right, and not necessarily listening to what you want, kind of picking up on those, that would be a little bit of a red flag. It's obviously we try our best not to bring in our own personal experiences. We're not perfect. I've, raised, 2 little ones as a nanny. Mary has 3 girls of our own. We've been around babies and kids for a very long time. So we obviously kind of pick here and there, but you don't want somebody that's going to come in that's only going to share their information based off of personal experiences, right? You want somebody that's going to be objective. You want somebody that's going to look at the whole picture. You want somebody that's going to support the decisions that you make, again, not coming in with their own agenda. You want somebody that you feel comfortable with because we are going to be in your home and we're going to be with you during your most vulnerable time period, right? Like we are going to be there with you while you're, in the bathroom or, in bed, most likely half naked or all the way naked. Like you want to feel comfortable with that person and just, making sure that, what else are they going to do, for at least for postpartum support, like what other services do they provide other than just taking care of the baby? Are they going to do like Mary and I do like housework? Like I said, we do laundry and we do, dishes and kitchen cleanup and we do food prep and meal making and just making sure that, all of that's being done safely and, that person is familiar with like healthy sleep or healthy sleep guidelines, right? Like where to, putting a baby in a flat sleeping surface, and, not kind of that old school thinking of how to put a baby to sleep, or, so just making sure they're up to date, they've got the education that fits well for your family, and that you guys just mesh well. And you can really kind of figure that out in the first call. And then, obviously, like I said, Mary and I come in, we do home visits. And that's where, again, we get to kind of connect with our families and see if we're going to be a good fit. So, yeah, I think those are kind of the credentials, the CPR certification, the references are going to be like the top three that I can think of. Everything else is just going to be about like personality. And if you feel like, they're going to be a right fit in your home.
And at what point should you start looking for someone? Do you look when you're 6 months pregnant? Do you, how soon should you kind of start shopping around? And is it ever too late? I mean, it's probably too late for me, but like, if you have like a 6-month-old and you're really struggling, like, is it too late to call in someone like you? Or talk to us a little bit about that.
So it's never too late. Postpartum is forever. So in terms of when to start, I mean, the earlier, the better, right? We've got folks that reach out to us as soon as they know that they're pregnant. All the way to folks that have said, hey, my baby got here about a week ago and we're really struggling and we want to see if you have availability. So for us, it really doesn't matter. We're typically going to take everybody we possibly can. If we can't, for some reason, we do have other postpartum resources in the area that we're happy to refer to or connect with, so that we can do a combination of support with them. But for folks that are, let's say, like 6 months, you can always reach out to us and we can assess the situation. If we think it's more of just like, hey, maybe you would do well with like a nighttime, like a sitter that came in from the hours of like, 4 to 8, especially if there are other siblings in the house, maybe that'll be a better fit, especially financially, right? Because we are going to be more expensive than your nannies or even your newborn care specialists or your, obviously, like your local babysitter. So kind of figuring out, what's going to be the best fit for a family. If a mom goes, listen, I want you and I don't care, we'll be there if we can be there. I have families that I'm still working with and their baby, I just have a slew of babies that just turned 1 that I still go over, on the, once or twice a week and support them and support mom so she can, go out and run errands or take some time for herself, which all goes into postpartum support. So we're pretty flexible, but yeah, I mean, the sooner the better in terms of reaching out, but it's never too late.
Good to know. Good to
know.
So, and what do you see? I mean, I think in the last 5 years, I mean, we've talked a lot about how, postpartum care has changed and stuff like that. I feel like in the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of postpartum services, everything from pelvic floor therapy to doulas to night doula. I just put pre and postnatal yoga, I feel like since kind of like right before COVID, through COVID, and now even after, I feel like we're just seeing a lot of services offered. What do you think is the next big thing for postpartum support for families?
What I would love to see would be 2 things. So what I would love to see in terms of just, us humans, right, is that instead of showering mom with a bunch of clothes that aren't ever going to fit the baby because they're the wrong season at the wrong time, right? That we start postpartum support funds, right? So just like you would register, for that's a new thing, right? This honeymoon and house fund type of thing after you're married. Let's start registering for postpartum or birth support. There's a company called, I think it's like Little Honey Money. I'll send you the link so you can add it. That has like a platform where you can say, hey, instead of presents, let's, do this instead. Because I'll tell you, a lot of that stuff, and I see it all the time, is unopened in the baby's closet and stays there for a year and then either gets regifted or donated, which is amazing. But think about all of that money that could have been used for postpartum support. So that's what I would, I'm hoping to see more of. I would love to see insurance companies or something start to either reimburse for postpartum care and like postpartum doulas. I don't know how, we'll see how that goes. I would love to see pelvic floor therapy be a must that everybody has to do even prior to their 6-week visit, that it's included in their their postpartum hospital whatever, like it's included, because pelvic floor is huge. Having the pelvic floor support is big. Catching it early is amazing. I've got a really good girlfriend that's still in some major tailbone discomfort, and her son is going to be 9 years old.
Wow.
And she's still dealing with birth trauma because it wasn't caught back then, right? So if we can start including pelvic floor therapy as something that's just part of our postpartum care, that would be amazing. Yeah, that's a big one for me. And just having, it would be wonderful if the insurance companies covered or reimbursed for postpartum doula support, and it was actually like, for the doulas, the appropriate amount of reimbursement too, which you never know. So that's what I would love to see in the future.
I mean, I feel like the registry we could see in the next couple of years. Like, I think you're right.
100%.
I think that's definitely on the horizon. I think that consumerism and then this generation coming up is very different. I see it in my kids. They're very into like thrifting and buying pre-owned, and it's just interesting. It's an interesting shift to see. So I definitely see that as, a potential. The insurance part, I mean, we can dream, but I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah. You never say never, right?
You never know. All right. Well, you were amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap it up for today?
I don't think so. This has been awesome. As you can tell, like I love talking lactation and postpartum support, and just really excited to, continue to offer support to our Northeast Florida families. This last year has been amazing for me. I didn't know how this was going to go. And it's been such an amazing journey, and I'm so thankful for Mary. Like I said, she's been such an amazing partner. I'm thankful for my own partner, Josh, who keeps the house, together and takes care of our fur babies and is so supportive of my wacky schedule. I could not do what I do without him. So yeah, I'm just really excited to continue to grow. Definitely reach out to me if you have any questions about anything, whether it's, lactation or infant feeding or, postpartum, anything. If I don't know the answer, I've got, like I said, wonderful resources, and definitely check out our website to learn more about what Mary and I offer as postpartum doulas. And I think that's it.
Well, I ask everybody to tell us what's your favorite thing about living in Jacksonville.
I love that. I love the different neighborhoods. I mean, I love the weather, although not right now, but I'm from Northeast. I know I'm from Pennsylvania. And so coming down here weather wise, just, I do love it down here for the most part. But I love the different neighborhoods. I live in the Murray Hill, Riverside area. And so we get, a cool little eclectic community down here, but we can be at the beach in 30 minutes, or we could be, down where my parents live, near Nocatee, and it's a different vibe. Or we could, go to Southside and it's a different vibe. You're just, and even in the beaches area, there's a different vibe. So I love that there's just different little communities all within Jacksonville. I like that people are surprised by Jacksonville, right? Like when I first moved down here, people were like, why are you going to Jacksonville? And now I'm like, you got to come. Like, it's a cool place. We're only 45 minutes from St. Augustine, a couple hours from Savannah. We've got Orlando, like it's a cool little spot here. So I love all the different communities, all the different neighborhoods. I love our Duval Pride. That's fun. That's always fun to be a part of. And yeah, I love the Jags. I'm excited for this season. So
yeah, I think we're all excited for this season. So
yeah.
All right. Well, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yep. So you can find me on Instagram at hugsandSnugs_Jax. I believe that's right. But most importantly, you can find us at www.postpartumdoulasjacksonville.com. That's where you're going to find a lot of my information. And then from there, you can be linked to either Mary and I's website as well. And I also have a Facebook page, but I'm most active on my Instagram page. So.
Perfect. And we'll put links to the social media and all the websites in the show notes so everybody can find you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel with Hugs and Snugs, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode of Jacksonville Momcast, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us at Jacksonville Momcast on all the social medias for show updates and more information about our guests. To learn more about what you heard today, visit our show notes at jacksonvillemomcast.com. Thanks for listening.